All right, so we're tackling irregular verbs today. They really can make you feel like you're wrestling with the English language, huh? I mean, they just refuse to play by the rules, just won't neatly lead for the past tense.
Yeah, they're the rebels.
Total rebels. But we've got a plan. We're going deep with mastering irregular verbs in past tense from Learn English with Dr. Henry. And we're going to uncover the secrets of these tricky verbs and some seriously cool ways to, make them stick.
What I find so interesting is that these irregular verbs actually give us a glimpse into like the history of English. They're like almost like linguistic fossils.
Oh boy.
Remnants of older forms of the language.
That's so cool. I never thought about it that way. So it's not just memorization. There's like a deeper story thread behind these verbs.
For example, many irregular verbs come from Old English and other Germanic languages, really. They've just held on to their unique forms over centuries, while other verbs kind of adapted to more regular patterns.
So by learning irregular verbs, we're actually kind of connecting with like the roots of English.
Absolutely. It's like unearthing these hidden linguistic treasures, and this historical perspective can make learning them so much more meaningful.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But I gotta be honest, there are a ton of irregular verbs out there. The episode mentions around 200. How can we even begin to tackle all of them?
Well, you don't have to become like a walking dictionary overnight. I think the key is to start with the most common ones. And then gradually expand your vocabulary.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Like building a house, right? You start with a strong foundation and then you add on from there.
Okay, so no need to cram all 200 at once. But how do we even start making sense of these, like, irregular forms? They seem so random.
Yeah, they do seem random. That's where learning strategies come in. And the episode has some really fantastic tips, actually.
Yeah.
One technique that I think is particularly helpful is chunking. Grouping similar verbs together to kind of spot patterns.
Oh, I like that. Like how begin, began, begun all have that in sound in them, and sing, sang, sung all rhyme. Are there other groups like that?
You bet. Think about drink, drank, drunk, or ring, rang, rung. These patterns help to create a sense of rhythm and rhyme, which honestly makes them easier to remember.
I can already feel those verbs getting less intimidating. But you know what else? The episode also talks about making learning fun. What's that all about?
Our brains love stories, and they're incredibly powerful for memory.
Okay.
The source material suggests creating vivid, even silly stories to help remember these irregular verb forms.
They gave the example of a bear walking into a cafe, right? What did the bear do?
Okay, so the bear walks into a cafe, right?
Yeah.
And he drinks all the coffee, eats someone's sandwich, and then just runs away.
Oh my goodness. That's hilarious. But isn't that kind of like a time-consuming way to learn?
That's a fair point. It really is about finding the techniques that work best for you,
Yeah.
Not every strategy is going to resonate with every learner.
Makes sense.
Some people might prefer like visual aids, like flashcards or, diagrams, while others might benefit from auditory learning, like listening to recordings or even creating their own jingles.
So it's about experimenting and finding your own, like, learning groove.
Exactly.
I like that.
And remember, what works for one person, it might not work for another. The key is to find a method that you enjoy, and that fits your learning style.
Totally. Oh, speaking of different learning styles, the source material also talks about, like, the power of music. And I am all about that. I mean, music can be so catchy, so memorable.
Absolutely. There's a reason we often remember songs from our childhood, or those catchy jingles from commercials.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Music, it taps into different parts of our brain, makes learning more engaging.
They even included, like, a little jingle in the episode, right? Something like, go, went, gone, seesaw scene.
Exactly.
It's like, I can't help but tap my foot to that.
And that's the whole point, right? When you turn grammar rules into, like, a song or a rhyme, it's just way easier to remember.
It really is.
You'd even create your own, like, personalized jingles or raps about irregular verbs.
Oh, I can already see myself coming up with, like, a whole irregular verb album. But beyond the fun factor, is there any science behind why these techniques work so well?
There sure is. These techniques tap into some really powerful learning principles, like active recall, spaced repetition, and multisensory learning.
Okay, break that down for me. What do those fancy terms actually mean?
Okay, so active recall is about actively retrieving information from your memory, rather than just, passively reading or listening.
Okay.
So when you create a story or a jingle, you're actually forcing your brain to work harder to recall those verb forms, which ultimately strengthens those memory connections.
So it's like giving your brain a little workout.
Exactly.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Yeah. Spaced repetition is another key principle, and it involves revisiting information at increasing intervals, which helps to solidify long-term memory.
Oh.
So instead of cramming all the irregular verbs at once, you'd review them periodically, gradually increasing the time between reviews.
Makes sense. It's like watering a plant, a little bit at a time, consistently, to help it grow strong roots.
Perfect analogy.
I like that one.
Yeah. And then multisensory learning. This is about engaging different senses, sight, sound, even movement, to create a richer learning experience.
I see.
So think about those fun stories and jingles. They involve visual imagery, auditory input, and even kinesthetic activity if you act them out.
So we're not just like memorizing words on a page, we're creating a whole sensory experience around them.
Precisely.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's what makes these techniques so effective. They tap into our natural learning abilities and make the process just more enjoyable, more memorable.
I love how we're connecting these like seemingly simple techniques to like real science-backed principles. It makes you realize there's a lot of like thought and strategy behind effective learning.
Absolutely. And the source material doesn't stop there. It also emphasizes the importance of active practice, like actually writing sentences using irregular verbs.
Oh, that's a great point. It's one thing to like memorize verb forms.
Yeah.
But it's quite another to actually use them in context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source material recommends writing like 3 to 5 sentences every day.
Yeah.
Using a variety of irregular verbs.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a novel, just, a few sentences to solidify your understanding and build fluency.
Yeah, that seems manageable. You could even turn it into like a fun challenge, like writing a silly story or a poem using as many irregular verbs as possible.
I love that idea. It's all about finding ways to make practice engaging and enjoyable.
Earlier we talked about the historical roots of irregular verbs
Yeah.
and how they connect us to the past. But I'm also curious about the opposite. Like, how do these verbs shape our thinking and understanding of the world in the present?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
Irregular verbs, where there's unique forms and patterns, they kind of force us to think outside the box, to challenge our assumptions about how language works.
Yeah, it's like they're reminding us that there's not always a clear-cut, rule-bound path. Sometimes we have to embrace the unexpected, the unconventional.
Exactly. And this concept of embracing irregularity, it extends like far beyond grammar. It's relevant to so many aspects of life, from problem solving to creativity to personal growth.
I'm starting to see how these irregular verbs are more than just grammar rules. They're like little metaphors for how we approach life itself.
Yeah. They remind us that sometimes the most interesting paths are the ones that deviate from the norm, the ones that challenge our expectations.
Just like those irregular verbs that refuse to conform to the standard ed ending, they have their own way of doing things, and they're still perfectly functional and effective.
It's a beautiful analogy, and it highlights the importance of flexibility and adaptability. Sometimes we need to break the rules to think differently, to find our own unique paths to success.
That's a powerful message, and it makes me think of all the innovators and trailblazers throughout history, the ones who dared to challenge conventions and create something new.
Exactly. Think of artists, scientists, entrepreneurs. They often have to, break the mold, to think outside the box, to find their own ways of doing things.
I'm starting to see how mastering irregular verbs can almost be a metaphor for mastering life itself. It's about embracing the unexpected, the challenging, and finding your own unique way to navigate it all.
It's a profound thought. And it shows how even like seemingly mundane grammar rules can spark these deeper reflections about ourselves.
Yeah.
And the world around us.
Speaking of sparking reflections, the source material includes a little quiz to test your knowledge of irregular verbs. Do you think our listeners are up for the challenge?
I have no doubt. Let's put those irregular verb skills to the test.
All right, get ready. Here are 3 sentences with blanks for you to fill in with the correct past tense of the irregular verb. Listen closely. Yesterday, I blank eat a delicious pizza. Last week, she blank go to the movies with her friends. They blank take a road trip to the mountains last month. Take a moment to think about it.
Okay, I think I've got it.
All right, let's see if you got it right. The answers are ate, went, and took. How'd you do?
Nailed it. See, these irregular verbs aren't so scary after all.
Exactly. It's all about finding the right approach and embracing the challenge. This deep dive has really kind of shifted my perspective on irregular verbs. I used to see them as like these annoying rule breakers, but now I kind of appreciate their quirkiness and the unique flavor they add to the English language.
I'm glad to hear that. It's all about reframing our thinking.
Yeah.
Instead of viewing them as obstacles, we can see them as opportunities to expand our understanding of language and in history.
And maybe even as metaphors for embracing the unexpected in life. But before we get too philosophical, I wanted to circle back to those mnemonic devices we touched on earlier.
Oh yeah. The source material had that funny one for go, went, gone. It was something like go, when, gone. Like picturing someone deciding when to leave.
Right. It sounds silly, but it actually works. It's like those ridiculous commercials you can never get out of your head. They stick with you because they're so unexpected.
Absolutely. Those quirky connections, they just tap into our natural sense of humor and make learning so much more enjoyable. And when we're having fun, we're more likely to retain information.
It's like sneaking vegetables into a smoothie. You get all the benefits without even realizing it.
Perfect analogy.
Thanks.
So if you're struggling to remember a particular irregular verb, right, try coming up with a funny image, a rhyme, or even a short story. You'll be surprised how much it helps.
And don't be afraid to get creative and personalize those techniques. What works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. The key is to find what resonates with you and makes the learning process feel, less like a chore. And more like a game.
Speaking of games, the source material mention using flashcards and online quizzes to practice irregular verbs. Have you ever used those methods?
I have, and they can be really effective.
Yeah.
Flashcards are great for visual learners, and online quizzes, they provide instant feedback.
Yeah.
And help you track your progress.
There are even apps like Quizlet. That make learning interactive and fun.
I've heard good things about Quizlet. It's like having a personal tutor in your pocket.
Exactly. And it's not just about rote memorization. Many of these apps actually incorporate those learning principles we discussed earlier, like active recall and spaced repetition.
So it's a win-win. You're having fun while also, strengthening your memory and fluency.
Yes, but
what could be better?
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything on irregular verbs. We explored their historical context.
Yeah.
Unpacked some really effective learning strategies, and even discovered how they can inspire us to embrace the unexpected in life. What are your final thoughts on all of this?
Well, I have to say, I'm walking away from this deep dive with a newfound appreciation for these rule breakers. They're not just grammar headaches. They're reminders that there are multiple ways to get things done, and sometimes the most unconventional path is the most interesting one.
Well said. And remember, learning a language is a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps along the way, but with the right tools and a positive attitude, you can overcome any challenge.
And who knows, you might even start to enjoy those irregular verbs along the way. They add a little spice and personality to the English language.
Absolutely. So keep exploring, keep practicing, and remember that even the most daunting grammar rules can be mastered with a little effort and a lot of fun.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of irregular verbs. We hope you've learned some valuable tips and gained a new perspective on these linguistic rebels.
Until next time, happy learning.